So, it was late June of 1993. I was 13 and I was watching the first season finale of Star Trek Deep Space Nine in the Hands of the Prophets. I was on the couch watching the episode and I noticed there was a very familiar quality about this new character the episode introduced, Vedic Wynn. Something about her face and her voice. Then it hit me. Vedic Wynn, jerk-ass Bajoran creationist, was Nurse Ratchet. Or, more specifically, she was played by the same actor who also played Nurse Ratchet in the film One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. And if you're saying to yourself, wait a second, Steve, do you expect us to believe you had seen One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest by the time you were 13? No, I don't. And I hadn't, and even after I saw it, probably around 15 or 16 actually, it still took me a few years to put it together that Wynn and Ratchet were played by the same actor, but the anecdote is better if I had, and you had to ruin it with your questions and your disbelieving bullshit. So, thanks a lot. Now that we've got that unpleasantness out of the way, the actor who played Nurse Ratchet and Wynn, two of the great unpleasant characters in the history of film and television, was Louise Fletcher. She died last month at the age of 88, and since I talk about Star Trek a lot, I thought it was only appropriate to spend a few minutes reflecting on her contribution to the franchise, because I think she was one of the most impressive recurring guest stars any Star Trek show ever had. But in order to do that, I need to start with One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, because the reason I was so impressed to find Louise Fletcher playing a character in a Star Trek show, whenever I realized that was a thing that was happening, was that she had been so goddamn brilliant in Cuckoo's Nest. Nurse Ratchet is the villain of One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. In the novel from which the film is adapted, the character doesn't even have a proper name. She's referred to simply as Big Nurse. And that tells you a lot about her right there. It's not just that Ratchet is physically big, it's that her presence, her authority, her cold-blooded commitment to the rules, no matter how unfair and inhumane those rules might be, looms over everything else in the film. Ratchet is calm, cool, always in control. She's superficially polite, but unmistakably condescending. She endorses or sometimes even personally carries out acts of cringe-inducing cruelty, always with a placid smile. Sound like anyone else we know. Wynn is very much like Ratchet, but she has something Ratchet lacks. Nurse Ratchet seems content in her current position. She's a petty tyrant. Her domain is small, but she has absolute authority over it, and she's good with that. Wynn, on the other hand, is defined as much by her ambition as by any of her other qualities. From the moment we meet her in the episode In the Hands of the Prophets, she is scheming to increase her power and enlarge her sphere of influence. While Wynn's visit to Deep Space Nine initially appears to be for the purpose of protesting the lack of Bajoran religious content in Keiko's school lessons, it's eventually revealed that Wynn's true intentions were to whip up a controversy that would draw Vedic Bareil, her main rival for the leadership of the Bajoran religion, to the station so Wynn could have him assassinated. It's hard to imagine Nurse Ratchet going to that much trouble, or sticking her neck out so far. If Ratchet was a cleric in the Bajoran faith, all she'd need would be a small church or a parochial school that she could run with an iron fist and a velvet glove. A modest, out-of-the-way corner of the world where she could practice her humble form of detached sadism, and she'd be as happy as a pre-adolescent Ed Kemper with a box of kittens and a shovel. When, though, she knows she's destined for bigger and better things, and she's determined to get what she deserves, no matter what anyone else has to say about it. It's a testament to the strength of Wynn's character and the power of Louise Fletcher's performance that her presence in Deep Space Nine feels so large, even though she actually appears in only 14 episodes. Despite the failure of her assassination plot against Vedic Burial, Wynn is eventually elected to the office of Kai, the leader of the Bajoran Church, and in the third season episode Shakar, following the death of Bajor's first minister, Kaiwin is also appointed the temporary leader of the planet's government, a post she hopes to keep long-term by winning an upcoming special election. Because separation of church and state, Wynn, she's not too big on that. By the way, people who oppose church-state separation being bad guys, that's not just a Star Trek thing. That applies to real life as well. Just saying. The main reason Kaiwin gets the job as interim first minister is that she has recently completed negotiations for a peace treaty between Bajor and its longtime enemy Cardassia. Those negotiations take place earlier in Season 3 in an episode which I think serves as Deep Space Nine's best showcase of what makes Wynn as a character and Louise Fletcher as an actor so special. It's an episode called Life Support. A Bajoran ship docks at the station. Aboard are Kaiwin and a seriously wounded Vedic Burial. Odo sees them carrying Burial away, and he's like, "Odo to Kira, you should get down to the infirmary. Your boyfriend, Vedic Burial's been injured, and, it might be the last time he sees you, so wear something nice." O'Brien tells Sisko that the ship was damaged due to an accident caused by a flaw in one of its components, but Kaiwin isn't so sure. While Bashir performs emergency surgery in an attempt to save Burial's life, Wynn meets with Sisko privately in his office. Sisko asks why she thinks the accident that damaged the ship was no accident. "Well," Wynn says, "the thing is, I've been conducting secret negotiations with the Cardassians to establish a peace treaty between Cardassia and Bajor, and Burial and I were on our way to a secret meeting with a member of the Cardassian Central Command, so I don't know." Sisko's like, "No shit. Don't take this the wrong way, but I never would have guessed that you would be the one to try and establish a lasting peace between Bajor and Cardassia, because, you know, you're just the worst." And Wynn's like, "Yeah, well, it was all Burial's idea, and I was pretty skeptical until he told me that if it works, I could take credit for it. Hey, I wonder how Burial's doing." Meanwhile, in the infirmary, Burial's dead. Bashir breaks the news to Kira like, "I'm so sorry. I did all the usual Star Trek shit, but his injuries were just too severe. He's fucking dead." Or is he? Immediately after hustling Kira out the door, Bashir returns to the operating room like, "Okay, let's get cracking on this autopsy. And speaking of cracking, where's my trusty rib spreader? Oh, Ribby!" But before Bashir can break open Burial's chest and start rooting around in his guts, he notices something unexpected. Burial's brain is still firing neurons. Bashir turns to his nurse and says, "My God, his brain is still working. If I do just a little bit more Star Trek shit, we might be able to revive him." So Bashir does a little bit more Star Trek shit, and it works. Burial wakes up. Sisko comes to visit him a little later, along with Kira and Kaiwin, who declares Bashir to be a miracle worker, then turns to Burial like, "So anyway, now that you've been raised from the dead for like 5 whole minutes, let's get back to those Cardassian negotiations." And get back to those Cardassian negotiations they do. The Cardassian representative, Legate Tyrell, will arrive at Deep Space Nine tomorrow to begin face-to-face talks. So Wynn is by Burial's bedside in the infirmary, and he's giving her advice for how to conduct the negotiations, telling her things like, don't start out by demanding the Cardassians return all the priceless religious relics they stole. Don't spit in his face as soon as he walks in the room. If he makes fun of your nose, don't retaliate by making fun of his neck. Wynn's memorizing all this like, good, I'll take that into consideration. Wynn leaves and Bashir comes back in and he says, "Okay, so slight bump in the road vis-a-vis your recovery. It turns out that thing I did to bring you back to life is probably going to kill you." Bashir tells Burial that he wants to put him into stasis while they figure out how to help him, but that could take months, which would mean Burial would miss the peace negotiations. Burial's like, Kaiwin is definitely going to fuck up these negotiations if I'm not here to advise her, so I'm going to veto your plan to indefinitely park me in a freezer. Is there a treatment you could try maybe right now? As it turns out, there is a treatment Bashir can try right now. He tells Bareil about this experimental drug, Provasic, that reduces arterial plaque and lowers the risk of serious heart disease. Now, you might have heard that it's been found to cause severe liver damage in a certain number of patients, but the only source for those claims is Dr. Richard Kimball. And are you going to believe him? Dude murdered his wife. Nice looking beard, though. Never mind. Apparently, the drug Dr. Bashir tells Bareil about is actually called Vasicin, and Provasic is from something else. Bashir tells Bareil that the drug could help him, at least for a little while, but there's also a chance it could seriously damage his organs. Are we sure it's not Provasic? Because, okay. Bareil's like, well, shoot me up! Meanwhile, Leggett Tyrell has arrived, and as Bashir feared, Wynn's negotiations with him aren't going well. After their first session ends, Wynn turns to Sisko and says, that Cardassian fascist is up to something. And Sisko's like, you think? Wynn returns to the infirmary to confer with Bareil, but in the middle of the conversation, he's like, ow, my organs! Wynn says, hey, doctor, his mortal injuries are distracting from our negotiation prep. Can you shoot him up with some more junk? But Bashir refuses, and both he and Kira tell Wynn to get lost. So she leaves, but before she goes, she tells Bareil, just remember, our gods really, really want you to keep helping me, even if it kills you. Okay, bye. Bashir gives Bareil a once-over and says, yep, just as I thought, that drug fried your organs. I can replace them with artificial organs, which is no big deal because this is Star Trek, but if you keep taking the drug, the damage is only going to get worse, so I really think you should reconsider letting me freeze you and keep you in a drawer for a while. But Bareil is resolute. He tells Bashir, give me those plastic guts and keep pumping my veins full of that sweet, sweet liquid murder. Bashir agrees. You know that ancient principle of medicine, the customer is always right. But after the organ replacement surgery, he drops in on Kaiwin. He says, hey, so Bareil wants to continue taking that experimental drug so he can keep helping you with these negotiations, and that's going to kill him? So I was wondering if you could give him the rest of the week off so I can pack him in ice so he won't, die? And Wynn says, yeah, no, I'm not doing that. Besides, it's Bareil's decision, and he says he wants to keep taking the drugs and getting his organs replaced, so why are we even talking about this? It's dummy shit. You're a dummy. So Bashir tries a different strategy. He tells Wynn, hey, look, you're the Kai. These negotiations are your show. Why should you have to share the credit with a weak-ass loser like Bareil who can't even keep his own organs functioning? Finish the negotiations solo and claim your place in history. Wynn's too smart to go for that, though. She reminds Bashir that the negotiations are not guaranteed to be successful. And Bashir's like, oh, and if they fail, you want to be able to blame Bareil instead of taking responsibility for yourself. Right, you're a huge piece of shit. I forgot for a second. Wynn's like, I won't forget what you've said here, Doctor. That you're a huge piece of shit? Good, I hope you don't. Bareil takes another turn for the worse. Bashir has a meeting with Sisko, Kira, and of course Kaiwin. Sisko asks what the prognosis is, and Bashir says he's unconscious now, and the left half of his brain is cooked, so I don't think he's waking up anytime soon. Then Wynn chimes in with a helpful suggestion. Why not replace the damaged half of his brain with an artificial implant? Bashir says he could probably do it, but having half of his brain replaced could radically alter Bareil's personality. He might become emotionally flat, detached, robotic. Can you imagine? Bareil? But this time, Kira agrees with Wynn, because Bareil would want Bashir to do whatever was necessary to allow him to continue assisting Wynn in the negotiations. So Bashir's like, fine, I'll replace half of his brain with computer parts. So Bashir replaces half of Bareil's brain with computer parts. And Kira's there when he wakes up, and she's like, Bareil, how are you feeling? And Bareil's like, Hello, Major. I am functioning acceptably. Kira's like, oh, thank God his personality hasn't been affected. Robo-Barial helps Kaiwin to successfully complete the peace treaty. This is a big deal. A formal peace agreement between Bajor and Cardassia. They throw a party in the wardroom. Quark shows Win a dessert he named after her. Everyone's happy. But then Bashir is paged to the infirmary. Bashir, Win, and Kira gather around Barial's bedside. The other half of Barial's brain just gave out. Kira says, well, can't you just replace the other half of his brain with an implant? But Bashir finally puts his foot down. No, he says, this is where it ends. If I replace the rest of his brain with a machine, the person who wakes up might look like Barial and sound like Barial, but he won't be Barial. You mean he would be a non-Barial? Yes, Major. I'm sorry. I know you feel a great confection for him. Kira doesn't want to give up, but Kaiwin says, you know what? I've done some soul searching, and I think we should listen to Dr. Bashir. Kira's like, oh, sure, now that you've got your peace treaty, you don't need him anymore. Win's like, yup. Say hi to the prophets, Barial. Tell him Win sent you. Peace. And then Barial dies, and everyone is sad. Well, almost everyone. For a while. So yeah, life support is the ultimate Kaiwin is just the worst episode. She shamelessly but skillfully manipulates Barial to place his position as her advisor ahead of his well-being and ultimately his life. She appeals to his religious faith and to his feelings of responsibility to the people of Bajor and to her as the Kai. And when Dr. Bashir tries to persuade her to release Barial of those responsibilities, she flat out refuses. But in that superficially pleasant and reasonable way she has. Louise Fletcher has this thing she does as Win, where the more evil she's being, the nicer she acts. So if you ever turn up at Kaiwin's house and she smiles warmly and hugs you and invites you in for tea, that means she's probably got bodies dissolving in barrels of acid in her back room. Plus, let's not forget, the episode makes it clear that all the groundwork for these negotiations with Cardassia was done by Vedic Barial. Win says that herself. So he does all the work, then gets hurt, and Win pressures him to keep doing all the work so she can finish the negotiations and take all the credit. And he can fall apart and die. And that's what happens. Jesus Christ, that is a villain. Kaiwin remains the absolute worst for the rest of the series. She does get a last-second redemption in the series finale, although that redemption is swiftly followed by a long-overdue comeuppance. She turns babyface to tell Sisko that destroying the magic book is the key to defeating Dukat in the fire caves, and then Dukat sets her on fire and burns her all up. With magic Star Trek fire, sure, but still, pretty rough way to go. Not that there's anything wrong with that, since, as I've said a few times already, she's just the worst. But she's supposed to be the worst. So you see, the fact that she's the worst is what makes her the best. Louise Fletcher herself had little in common with Kaiwin or Nurse Ratchet, her two most celebrated and enduring creations. Throughout her 60-year career in film and television, she won the admiration of audiences and the respect and accolades of critics and her peers, not through the patronizing sadism of Win or Ratchet, but through talent, professionalism, and dedication to her craft. As a person, she seemed to be humble and self-effacing, qualities that come through in her acceptance speech for the Best Actress Oscar she won in 1976 for playing Nurse Ratchet. Fletcher begins the speech by telling the audience of her peers, "I've loved being hated by you." She ends it with a message to her parents, both of whom were deaf, which she delivers verbally and through sign language.
I want to say thank you for teaching me to have a dream. You are seeing my dream come true.
Through the characters she played, Louise Fletcher moved us, made us angry, made us love her, and made us love hating her. And through Nurse Ratchet and Kaiwin, she taught and continues to teach us something very important. Both characters embody broken, corrupted systems, and both characters respond to individuals who challenge those systems by calmly reassuring them that everything is fine the way it is, and nothing needs to change. Defending the status quo against just and necessary reforms is its own kind of evil, and perhaps the most pernicious and pervasive kind of all. Louise Fletcher was an actor, an artist with a rare and wonderful gift. She shared that gift with us for a short time, but even though her life and her career are now complete, and her time as a player in Star Trek lasted only 7 years and a still hard-to-believe mere 14 episodes, the legacy she left behind will continue to entertain and hopefully enlighten us for a long, long time to come. Rest in peace. Look, not you. Not you either. There we go. Rest in peace, Louise Fletcher.